There are increasing signs that despite Boris Johnson securing a chunky majority in Parliament at the general election, of course, there could be another Remainer revolt from MPs in Parliament and the House of Lords, both looking to rebel against Boris Johnson's Brexit strategy. Absolutely disgraceful stuff, and we're going to get into all of the details and all the latest in this report. But before we get started, please give this video a thumbs up, click subscribe and the bell so you don't miss future videos. That really helps me out. Now, this comes from a report. Of course, we've seen this week the government move forward with the internal market bill, looking to override elements of the rotten withdrawal agreement. The likes of Nigel Farage and Ben Habib, of course, calling for the government to ditch the withdrawal agreement completely as the end of the transition period approaches at the end of this year. Dozens of Tory MPs prepare new Brexit revolt, is the report. Growing anger at bid to breach international law. The report that Boris Johnson is facing a revolt of up to 30 Conservative MPs. Tory MPs in Boris Johnson's own party planning a revolt potentially against the government's Brexit strategy. Quite unbelievable that as we get to the end of this negotiation, there'd be Conservative MPs looking to weaken the hand of the Prime Minister and his strategy. Quite unbelievable. The rebels have tabled an amendment that would bar the government from overriding the withdrawal agreement. Bar them from overriding the rotten withdrawal agreement without Parliament support. Sir Bob Neill, a Tory MP and chairman of the Justice Select Committee, tabled an amendment to introduce a parliamentary lock on the powers. It is likely to be voted on next week. And Theresa May, of course, one of those who's expressed concern at the government strategy. A lot of you guys not particularly impressed with that intervention, I must say, when I flagged that up in an earlier video. But apparently she could miss the vote because she is away. Now the government, this isn't just in the Commons. Deja vu all over again, isn't it? The government also facing opposition from peers in the House of Lords. Lord Howard, a Brexiteer, becoming the third former Tory leader to reject the government's strategy, warning they could damage Britain's global standing. Lord Howard calling it a sad day for the country, telling Times Radio, it's very bad because it damages our reputation for probity and rule of law. To hear a minister say that dispatch books you are passing legislation in breach of international law is a very sad day, he says. I'd never dreamt I'd hear a minister, still less a Conservative minister, say such a thing. It's interesting, isn't it? The approach the government taking now has the EU on the back foot. It's acting in a dynamic way. It's acting in a way that doesn't move in a straight diplomatic line. And obviously some very uneasy with that, but let me know what you think in the comments, guys. It seems Brexiteers far more happy with this strategy than Theresa May's capitulation sellout moves. Lord Howard saying he'd be very surprised, telling Sky News he'd be very surprised if the proposed UK internal market bill was passed by peers. He's quoted as saying, I'm sure that many of my Conservative colleagues will joining me in opposing it. Say that again. Lord Howard saying the House of Lords Conservative peers could be joining him in opposing what the government are trying to do on Brexit in these negotiations as we approach the end. This is quite unbelievable stuff. Lord Howard saying, so I'd be surprised if it gets through the House of Lords. And of course we've had Sir John Major speaking out against this approach as well. But Lord Lamont, a former Chancellor, say there was no way that the legislation, which would of course allow ministers to override elements of the withdrawal agreement, would pass through the Lords. A government source telling the Times that MPs who vote against the government over the internal market bill will not have the whip removed. So there you go. MPs, Conservative MPs, that could absolutely stitch up and embarrass the government at a critical point in these negotiations as we approach, as the clock runs down to the end of the year. Conservative MPs who rebel on this will not have the whip taken away. Now, Business Minister Nadhim Zahawi has said that the legislation, the plan, is necessary to disapply international agreements if they are harmful to your citizens. Tory rebels, of course, reported again, have tabled an amendment that would block the government from overriding the Brexit divorce deal, and it's understood that around 30 MPs could support it. Zahawi's saying that parliamentarians in the country will be able to scrutinise what we are saying next week when MPs vote on the internal market bill. So that's next week. Nadine Zahawi going on to say that the government is absolutely committed to the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol, adding, it's not a question of if we implement it, but how we implement it. And telling Times Radio, in the unlikely scenario that we don't reach an agreement, we can't allow existing provisions to harm Northern Ireland or the Good Friday Agreement. No minister, he says, could stand by and watch those communities be harmed. Now, Downing Street and the government have remained absolutely defiant on this internal market bill and their Brexit strategy. They've said they could not and would not withdraw the internal market bill, obviously after the EU threw their toys out of the pram. And of course, we saw an EU statement out yesterday saying that the EU would not be shy in using the mechanisms and legal remedies contained in the agreement to address any violations if the UK did not withdraw the provisions. An EU statement saying that Michael Gove was warned the withdrawal agreement contains a number of mechanisms and legal remedies to address violations of the legal obligations contained in the text, which, as I said, the EU will not be afraid of using. So, hinting, as I reported yesterday, potential legal action now the EU is looking at it. But Michael Gove, and to be fair, you've seen this around all of Boris Johnson's key allies. They're not, and we've seen U-turns from the government, of course, but on this, they're strident. They're not simply backing down after a little bit of criticism. Michael Gove saying, when he was asked, he was willing to swear on his job that the government will not back down. Michael Gove saying, yes, I made it perfectly clear to the Vice President Sefcovic, representing the EU side, that we would not be withdrawing this legislation, and he understood that. Of course, he regretted it. Now, this is high stakes, guys. Nigel Farage flagging this story on this potential Romania rebellion, saying the Remainers and Wreckers see their last chance. And the government are obviously taking it seriously, because Stephen Swinford, the deputy political editor of The Times, has just reported today that Boris Johnson has invited every Conservative MP to a mass Zoom call about this specific issue, about the internal market bill this evening. Goes on to say it's expected to last for an hour and comes amid a growing result over the government's decision to break international law. And as I said, guys, can you imagine if, as we reach the end of these negotiations, as we approach the end of the transition period, MPs and Lords in Parliament actively sabotaged the government's strategy and Brexit plan on what they're trying to do? It would be absolutely outrageous. But let me know what you think in the comments, guys. What do you think the government should do on this? Do you support what Boris Johnson... Because, of course, in the bubble, a lot of people, Remainer establishment types, they're all shocked and appalled. But I know hearing from you guys, you're really behind what Boris and Dominic Cummings and the government are trying to do here in their strategy. So let me know if that's still the case. Let me know how you want to see them respond to this. And, of course, as ever, if you've enjoyed this report, please click subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss future reports. And, of course, thank you for watching.